Two divers decide to dive one of the most dangerous caves in the world. One diver's body is recovered 10 years later, and the other's takes almost 21 years to recover after 3 failed attempts and a chance encounter.
Jacob's Well has long been shrouded in both natural beauty and haunting mystery. Nestled in the heart of Texas hill country, it looks serene from above. Crystal clear waters glimmering beneath the sun, surrounded by limestone and lush greenery. To the casual swimmer or curious traveler, it is simply a jewel of nature, a spring-fed pool that seems tranquil and inviting. Yet beneath its glassy surface lies one of the most dangerous and enigmatic cave systems in North America. This duality, the calm allure above and the labyrinthine voids below, has captured imaginations for generations. The site is infamous for its deadly allure, with divers drawn to its promise of discovery and swallowed by its unpredictable dangers. When the underwater drone was lowered into its depths, the device was not just entering a cave system, but crossing into one of the most foreboding natural mysteries, a place where light falters, silence reigns, and unsettling truths hide within the darkness. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. As the drone slipped beneath the water's shimmering surface, its cameras began capturing details no human eye could easily see. Jacob's Well plunges straight down before twisting into branching tunnels, each chamber darker and narrower than the last. For decades, divers who entered these passages often never returned, their lives claimed by sudden silt clouds, disorientation, or entrapment. The drone, unlike a human, did not panic when the walls closed in, or when vision was obscured by disturbed sediment. Its lights cut through the murk, revealing passages that appeared both sculpted by geological time and strangely alien in their atmosphere. The deeper it traveled, the more the cave felt less like part of Earth and more like a descent into something otherworldly. Each twist seemed to suggest there was more hidden than geology alone could account for. The most chilling discoveries were not the sheer size of the caverns or their dangerous formations, but the unexpected objects and impressions scattered within. Among rock shelves and sandy floors, the drone's cameras caught glimpses of items that did not belong. Rusted fragments lay embedded in silt, impossible to identify but eerily human in shape and structure. It became clear that these were remnants of past explorations. Snapped equipment, light housings, perhaps even oxygen tanks, abandoned in moments of desperation. Yet, as the drone hovered near one passage, its lights revealed something far more unsettling: markings along the limestone walls. At first, they seemed like scratches from rock or clawed movements in silt. But under closer inspection, they looked deliberate, as if lines had been carved, shapes etched, almost patterned. Whether these marks were the result of human attempts to navigate or something more ambiguous, no one could easily explain. As it traveled further, the drone's sonar mapping revealed chambers no diver had ever fully documented. These voids expanded unexpectedly, like hidden rooms within a house no one knew existed. In one of the larger caverns, the camera panned across a scene that sent shivers through the observing crew. The silt here was thicker, lying undisturbed for centuries, and within it rested forms that bore an uncanny resemblance to skeletal outlines. The shapes were distorted, eroded by time and minerals, but they were unmistakably evocative of bodies. Perhaps animals swept in from the surface long ago, or perhaps remnants of explorers from before modern records. The lack of clarity only heightened the terror, leaving the imagination to fill in the silence. The drone lingered, capturing every angle, before moving on into the next corridor. What made the findings terrifying was not merely the suggestion of past tragedies, but the overwhelming sensation that Jacob's Well is not just a cave system, but a trap laid by nature itself. The tunnels twist and fork with deceptive repetition, creating an almost deliberate maze. The water within grows colder and denser, currents shifting with no obvious cause. At times, the drone's sensors detected subtle vibrations, the kind that suggested unseen movement, as if the cave were alive and reacting. Divers had long reported the sensation of being watched, a creeping paranoia that often escalated into panic in the deepest chambers. Seeing these tunnels on a live feed made those old stories feel more plausible. It was not just claustrophobia. It was the environment itself, an oppressive and malevolent presence. The implications of these discoveries are both scientific and existential. From a geological perspective, the cave is a living archive, recording millennia of water flow, mineral deposits, and tectonic activity. Yet, in another sense, it is a graveyard of ambition and curiosity. The drone documented places where time seems frozen, where the remains of lost expeditions may still rest untouched. The presence of potential human or animal forms underscores how easily the line between exploration and fatality is crossed here. Scientists watching the footage could appreciate the data, but they could not deny the emotional weight of seeing those silent depths. It served as a grim reminder that human exploration always comes with a cost, and that nature does not bend to human daring. Perhaps the most unsettling element was the atmosphere itself, captured by the drone's lenses but also conveyed in the reactions of those observing. The water seemed to throb with heaviness, shadows looming in places where no light should bend. The deeper the drone went, the more its light seemed swallowed, as if darkness itself were alive, devouring illumination. This visual effect, while explainable through physics, produced an almost primal fear. It was as if the well was guarding its secrets, tolerating intrusion only up to a point. And though the drone was mechanical, its feed gave human eyes the sensation of being pulled further and further from safety. At every turn, the viewer felt one step closer to something that was not meant to be seen. The terror of Jacob's Well lies not in the dramatic action of sudden collapse or violent movement, but in its quiet persistence. It waits patiently, a seemingly tranquil spring at the surface, luring in those who cannot resist the mystery below. The underwater drone, unlike a diver, could not drown, could not panic, could not suffocate. Yet even as it mapped corridors and revealed new chambers, the haunting truth became evident. Technology could enter and record, but it could not dispel the oppressive dread. The well remains untamed, an environment where human control is illusionary. The drone may have returned with images, but the unanswered questions about the skeletal forms, the carved markings, the unnatural maze remain far more powerful than the footage itself. This descent into Jacob's Well did not resolve its mystery, but deepened it. Each recorded detail suggests there is far more to the place than geology and water pressure. The terrifying part is not what was confirmed, but what was hinted at, what remains lurking just beyond the range of cameras. To know that such voids exist, dark and waiting beneath the earth, is to confront the reality that there are places not meant for us. The underwater drone's journey provided a rare glimpse into this hidden world, but it also reinforced the lesson that some secrets, once glimpsed, only grow more unsettling the longer one thinks about them. The surface of Jacob's Well conceals its true nature with a deceptive charm. Families gather along its rocky edge, tourists snap photos of the spring's shimmering mouth, and children watch the bubbles rising as if it were some whimsical fountain. Yet beneath that stillness lies a yawning shaft that narrows and expands like the throat of a living creature, plunging into chambers whose limits defy expectation. When the underwater drone was deployed once more, this time with upgraded sensors and more powerful lighting, it began charting not only the familiar entry shaft, but also side tunnels that had been inaccessible in earlier explorations. What it encountered within those hidden corridors painted an even darker portrait of the cavern, one that made the first dive seem almost tame by comparison. As the drone descended again, its rotors pushing steadily against the gentle current, the opening shaft appeared familiar. Sunlight faded as it sank deeper, replaced by the cold glow of artificial beams slicing through suspended particles. The walls here were carved smooth by centuries of flowing water, pale limestone shimmering like polished bone. But soon, instead of continuing straight down as before, the drone veered into a passageway to the right, an opening only wide enough for its narrow frame. The chamber it entered was entirely different in character. Where the main shaft was vertical and simple, this tunnel curved like a serpent, coiling into the earth with no apparent destination. The ceiling dipped so low at times that the drone's casing scraped against rock, leaving faint scratches that would later be visible in the footage. It was in these tight spaces that the unsettling discoveries began. One of the most jarring sights appeared less than 30 feet into the side tunnel. A cluster of stones seemed to have been deliberately stacked near a bend, forming what looked like a small cairn. Natural formations usually tell their story through randomness, chaotic piles of rubble, jagged shards broken from above. This, however, looked intentional. The rocks carefully balanced in a way water currents alone could not have achieved. Some of the stones bore dark stains, discolorations that the cameras could not identify. Whether it was mineral residue or something else entirely was impossible to determine in real time, but the impression it gave was unmistakable. Someone had been here before, leaving a mark in the depths where no casual swimmer could reach. The presence of that structure in such a remote chamber unsettled even the most skeptical observers on the surface. Further along, the tunnel widened unexpectedly into a dome-shaped cavity. The water here was eerily still, untouched by the currents that pulsed through the rest of the system. The drone hovered near the ceiling, its lights panning slowly across the chamber, and revealed another disturbing feature: long, thin grooves etched into the limestone walls. They radiated outward from a central point, like the spokes of a wheel, stretching across several feet. Natural erosion usually follows patterns of flow, smooth channels carved by persistence. But these lines were sharp, irregular, and too deliberate in orientation. Scientists watching the live feed debated whether they might have been caused by old diving equipment scraping repeatedly against the stone, yet the sheer number and symmetry suggested otherwise. The deeper the footage went, the more the caves seemed less like accidental formations of nature, and more like places carrying strange imprints of purpose. When the drone pushed into the far side of the chamber, its sensors detected a sudden drop. The floor gave way into a shaft, plunging deeper than its sonar could initially measure. The decision was made to let the machine descend, and what it uncovered became the most disturbing footage of the mission. As it sank, the chamber walls pressed in, creating a tube barely wider than the drone itself. Then, after what felt like endless minutes, the shaft opened again into a cavern, larger than any discovered in the earlier mapping runs. Here, the silt was so thick that every movement stirred clouds that lingered like fog. The drone's light struggled to penetrate more than a few feet, casting halos that revealed glimpses of unsettling details. Along the floor lay objects half buried, elongated forms, twisted metal shapes, and outlines resembling skeletal remains. Some appeared to belong to animals, perhaps creatures that had wandered in during floods, but others seemed disturbingly humanoid in proportion. None of these could be confirmed without physical retrieval, but the suggestion alone was enough to silence the viewing room. It was as if the well had been collecting lost things for centuries, sealing them away where no sunlight could ever reach. The emotional weight of these discoveries was amplified by the environment itself. Every turn of the camera revealed spaces that seemed designed to inspire fear. Ceilings tapering downward to force confinement. Sudden pits that appeared without warning. Blind corners that swallowed light before revealing what hid beyond. Even though the drone itself was immune to dread, the people watching its feed could not escape the sensation that they were trespassing into a place deeply hostile to life. The caves were not simply voids. They felt inhabited by silence, as if something unseen lingered just outside the reach of illumination. Scientists often spoke clinically about Jacob's well, describing flow rates, sediment composition, and limestone fractures. But here, in these recordings, language slipped toward the primal. The well no longer seemed like a geological feature. It seemed like a warning. The most alarming moment of the mission came as the drone attempted to return. Having explored deeper than planned, its operators guided it back toward the entrance shaft. The return path should have been straightforward, retracing the mapped sonar patterns. Yet partway through, the drone's navigation systems began registering anomalies. Passages that should have been open appeared blocked. Walls seemed to have shifted, and familiar markers looked altered. For a machine relying on precise measurement, this was nearly impossible. Rocks do not simply rearrange themselves within hours, but the footage captured evidence that the tunnel floors were covered with fresh collapses, as though something had disturbed the cavern while the drone explored. The operators increased thrust to push the drone through narrowing spaces, each maneuver scraping its hull. Eventually, it emerged back into the main shaft, battered but intact. The recorded data, however, left questions that no geological explanation could easily answer. The implications of this second exploration were staggering. Jacob's well was no longer merely a beautiful but deadly spring. It appeared to be a labyrinth whose shifting nature defied expectations. The markings on walls, the cairn of stones, the skeletal impressions, and the inexplicable collapses all suggested the well is not a static environment. It changes, it hides, it unsettles, almost as if it resists intrusion. Such phenomena challenge the limits of scientific interpretation. Was this simply the product of ongoing erosion and subtle seismic activity? Or was there something far more enigmatic, an aspect of the cavern that responds actively to intrusion? The terror lay not only in what was seen, but in the realization that nothing here could be trusted to remain as it appeared. For those studying the footage, the psychological effect was profound. They described an uneasy compulsion to keep watching, as though turning away would mean missing something crucial, yet each frame pressed against their nerves like a weight. The underwater drone had ventured where humans could not survive for long, but instead of offering clarity, it delivered unease, amplifying the sense that Jacob's Well guards its secrets deliberately. It was not the sudden drama of collapse or violent currents that terrified most, but the quiet persistence of ambiguity. The cave system did not roar or strike. It whispered in half-seen shapes, in marks no one could explain, in the stillness of a chamber where light felt devoured. In that way, the drone's exploration became not just a technical achievement, but an encounter with the raw essence of dread. Even beyond the immediate findings, the implications ripple outward. For geologists, the footage presents puzzles about subterranean hydrology, unexplored chambers, and unknown connections to wider aquifer systems. For divers, it offers stark reminders of why the well has claimed lives: tight passages, deceptive turns, and silt that blinds even the most skilled. For the broader public, the discoveries blur the line between science and myth. Jacob's Well has always carried stories of being bottomless, of swallowing those who dared descend. Now, with footage capturing cairns, carvings, skeletal shapes, and tunnels that seem to shift, those old legends feel eerily validated. The terrifying aspect is not simply that such features exist, but that they reveal how little control humans truly have when descending into the planet's hidden spaces. The drone's journey into Jacob's Well is a confrontation with limits, of human exploration, of technology, and of comprehension. It revealed not only the raw beauty and danger of underwater caves, but also their uncanny ability to unsettle the mind. When footage shows a skeleton-like shape resting in eternal stillness, when walls display marks that cannot be explained, when tunnels rearrange themselves between entry and exit, the line between geology and something more elusive blurs. And in that blurred space lies terror, the kind that endures not because of what is proven, but because of what remains unanswered. Jacob's Well, illuminated by cameras yet untouched in essence, continues to remind us that some mysteries resist even the boldest attempts to unravel them. The footage from Jacob's Well continued to circulate among researchers, divers, and those drawn to the uncanny. Yet the most intriguing aspect of the drone's journey was not what it revealed directly, but the questions it left in its wake. As scientists pored over the recordings, they began to realize that the well was not only a place of peril, but also a kind of living archive, one that contained traces of forces far older and more mysterious than modern understanding could fully explain. The cavern system was a time capsule, but not one that merely recorded the past in stone. Instead, it seemed to shift and obscure itself as though memory and reality blurred in its depths. The unsettling revelations of its labyrinthine tunnels demanded a closer look at what makes such places uniquely terrifying. One of the key details that fascinated geologists was the composition of the limestone that forms the walls of Jacob's Well. Ordinarily, limestone caves carry predictable patterns: smooth conduits carved by water pressure, stalactites where drips persist, mineral veins marking centuries of flow. But in the drone footage, certain walls shimmered oddly when light passed over them. Layers appeared to ripple as if stacked by hand, creating an optical effect of movement, even though they were solid. In some frames, this made the cave look almost like it was breathing. The play of light across those wavering surfaces lent an illusion of sentience. It was not merely a natural tunnel anymore. It looked like the inside of some vast, living organism. The terror here was subtle yet potent, the fear that the explorers had not entered a cave but had been swallowed. Biologists analyzing the video were equally unsettled. In the dark chambers, the drone occasionally captured flickers of life: translucent shrimp drifting in the black water, blind fish darting across the beams, tiny organisms floating like dust. Yet one clip caused the greatest alarm. As the drone panned across a narrow fissure, two pale, elongated shapes shifted in the shadows, retreating into the rock. The motion was unmistakable, but the forms were unlike any cataloged species. Their skin, or what appeared to be skin, was ghostly white, and their movement sinuous, serpentine. Whether these were rare aquatic animals adapted to eternal darkness or something unknown, the footage was chilling. The well was not empty. It was inhabited, and by creatures that had never been recorded before. To see them vanish into crevices no human could reach only deepened the unease. The well was not just a tomb. It was an ecosystem hidden from the surface world, a reminder that alien life need not be extraterrestrial. It exists beneath our feet. The psychological toll on the team who monitored the exploration also deserves attention. As the drone lingered in chambers heavy with silt, several operators described an unshakable sensation of vertigo, even though they were safely on land. Watching the camera twist through tunnels gave them the physical impression of falling. Some reported their breathing quickening as if they themselves were submerged. These reactions are not unusual when observing claustrophobic environments, but the intensity here was notable. Hours of reviewing footage produced restless nights, recurring dreams of drowning, or visions of endless corridors. The well did not merely threaten those who entered physically, it reached into the minds of those who only watched from afar. The terror it inspired proved contagious, moving from stone and water to imagination and thought. In addition to these personal accounts, the drone's recordings sparked cultural conversations. Jacob's Well has always been accompanied by folklore, stories of spirits dwelling in its depths, whispers that it connects to other worlds, rumors of voices that call swimmers downward. For centuries, such tales were dismissed as exaggerations born from tragedy. Yet the sight of carvings etched into limestone walls, of cairns arranged in silence, of skeletal impressions half buried in silt, all these details lent credibility to the legends. The line between myth and evidence blurred. What if those who drowned had not simply been victims of disorientation? What if something deeper had compelled them forward, drawing them into spaces where no human should go? The footage did not confirm such theories, but it revived them with unnerving force. Sometimes the most terrifying discovery is not proof of the supernatural, but the erosion of certainty. When science cannot fully explain what is seen, fear rushes in to fill the void. The most striking part of the footage came near the end of the mission, in a chamber larger than any before. Here, the ceiling rose far above, disappearing into blackness, while the floor fell away into a pit whose bottom remained hidden. The chamber's proportions were cathedral-like, an underwater sanctuary untouched by light. As the drone circled, its lights revealed formations that looked unnervingly architectural. Pillars of stone aligned in patterns, ridges resembling steps, natural but suggestive of design. For those watching, the effect was almost overwhelming. It was as though the cavern itself had been constructed with intention. Rational minds argued that water flow and mineral layering could account for these shapes, yet the emotional impact lingered. To witness such a place in silence where natural processes mimic deliberate creation is to feel trapped between two worlds, one governed by science, the other by something unnameable. This chamber also carried another detail, barely caught on the edge of the frame. Along the wall, just beyond the drone's primary light, a faint reflection pulsed intermittently. At first, it seemed like stray minerals catching the glow, but as the camera steadied, the reflection appeared to move with rhythm, like a flicker of eyes watching from the dark. The image was too grainy to confirm, and skeptics dismissed it as distortion. Still, the impression was haunting. If it was an illusion, it was one uncannily timed. If it was not, then the well had revealed more than anyone had bargained for. The terrifying part was not that something was proven, but that something unknown lingered just beyond certainty. Human imagination filled the gaps with its darkest possibilities. The expedition also reshaped how the well is perceived in terms of risk. Diving into such a system has always been considered reckless, yet the drone's footage showed why. The tunnels are not merely tight, they are deceptive. Angles fold back on themselves, chambers loop into one another, and silt rises at the slightest movement, turning clear water into blindness within seconds. Even for machines, navigation proved nearly impossible in certain passages. For humans, the risk is amplified to fatal extremes. The well is a perfect trap, a labyrinth designed to confuse and consume. The terrifying implication is that the deaths recorded here were not accidents but inevitabilities. Anyone who enters is contending not with chance, but with a system engineered by nature itself to ensnare. The drone's exploration also raised larger questions about the relationship between humans and the hidden world beneath. So much of our understanding of Earth is surface-bound, shaped by landscapes we can walk, mountains we can climb, oceans we can sail. But beneath that thin veneer lies a planet riddled with voids, caverns, and tunnels stretching for miles. Most remain unseen, unmeasured, untouched. Jacob's Well is merely one gateway into that realm, and what it revealed was unnerving enough to suggest that countless other systems hold terrors far greater. The implication is profound. Humanity has not fully mapped its own home. The most alien worlds are not in distant galaxies, but in the dark places underfoot. To realize this is to confront a humbling truth, that we live on the skin of a planet whose interior remains in many ways unknown and unknowable. As more experts reviewed the recordings, new interpretations emerged. Some argued that the markings on the walls were not carvings at all, but traces of microbial colonies feeding on minerals, patterns left by life too small to see directly. Others believed the stacked stones might have formed naturally, balanced over centuries by subtle shifts in current. Each explanation sought to reclaim the footage from the realm of horror and return it to the language of science. Yet none could explain everything. The skeletal impressions, the moving shapes, the sense of tunnels rearranging themselves. The well resisted a single narrative, forcing even experts to admit the limits of certainty. That admission itself is terrifying, for it strips away the comfort of understanding. In Jacob's Well, even knowledge feels fragile. Perhaps the most chilling aspect is the idea that the drone has only scratched the surface. The caves stretch further than its batteries allowed, branching into corridors unmeasured, pits unfathomed. What lies beyond those limits remains unseen. If the first journeys revealed cairns, carvings, skeletal shapes, and unknown creatures, then what waits in the unexplored sections? The question hangs heavy, unanswered, and perhaps unanswerable. The true terror is not in what has been found, but in what remains hidden, just out of reach. Jacob's Well holds more secrets than one drone could uncover, and each hint of those secrets deepens the sense of unease. What lingers after the drone's journeys into Jacob's Well is not just the imagery of dark corridors and skeletal forms, but the silence between those discoveries. Silence underwater is already unsettling, magnified by the weight of pressure and the muffling of sound. But the silence recorded in these chambers was different. Audio sensors on the drone captured not simply an absence of noise, but fluctuations in vibration that felt patterned, almost like rhythms. At intervals, the feed picked up faint pulses, too low for the human ear but visible in the readings, steady, intermittent, then fading. Some analysts speculated these were caused by water shifting through unseen fissures or distant aquifer activity. Others argued the frequency appeared too regular, like a slow heartbeat echoing through stone. Whether coincidence or not, the data suggested the cave system is not inert but resonant, carrying its own strange music in the dark. That realization alone gave the exploration an edge of unease. The well does not merely sit in silence, it hums with a presence that feels alive. Another detail that stood out in the footage came from the sediment itself. The silt coating the floor was not uniform. Instead, in several chambers, it gathered in patterns that looked swept or arranged, spirals and arcs as though currents had traced deliberate paths. Hydrologists initially dismissed this as natural, but the shapes held too much symmetry to be dismissed outright. The spirals looked almost like symbols, repeating in places separated by considerable distance. If water alone sculpted them, it suggests a hydrodynamic phenomenon yet to be understood. But if not, then something within those chambers has been shifting sediment into forms that resemble communication. This hint of expression in the darkness is more frightening than the skeletal shapes, for it suggests not only life, but intention. The lighting in the deeper chambers offered another layer of unease. The drone's powerful beams illuminated structures in cold white, but at certain angles the water seemed to glow faintly with its own luminescence. This effect might be explained by minerals or bioluminescent organisms too small to capture clearly on video. Yet in motion, the light looked like drifting sparks, fireflies swirling in a night with no air. It lent the cavern an uncanny beauty, ethereal but unnerving, like standing inside a cathedral lit by ghosts. Those watching described the sensation as awe interwoven with dread. It was the kind of beauty that resists comfort, the kind that suggests a place was never meant to be entered, only observed from afar. Even more troubling was the way orientation dissolved in these depths. The drone carried gyroscopic stabilizers, yet its readings often faltered. At points, the machine appeared upright, but sensors indicated it was inverted, as if gravity itself twisted in the caverns. This distortion may have been caused by magnetic interference from mineral veins or pressure fluctuations, but to viewers it looked like the cave itself was manipulating direction. The terrifying implication is that Jacob's Well is not simply dangerous because of drowning or collapse. It is disorienting on a level that confuses even machines. For divers, this effect would be fatal. For technology, it means maps and measurements can never be fully trusted. The cave is not simply hidden, it actively resists being known. Each new discovery adds to a portrait of Jacob's Well, not as a natural spring, but as a threshold, a liminal place where human perception frays. Between rhythmic vibrations, patterned sediment, unexplained light, and shifting orientation, the message is clear. This is not an environment designed for visitors. It is a realm where rules bend, where certainty collapses, and where mystery holds the strongest claim. That is the essence of its terror, not the accidents of the past or the equipment lost along the way, but the realization that the well belongs to itself. It cannot be conquered, mapped, or tamed. It is a reminder that beneath the Earth's surface lie realms we are not meant to master, realms that guard their truths with silence, darkness, and the unrelenting weight of the unknown. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on an underwater drone exploring Jacob's Well's hidden depths? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.